We are having this special edition of discussions and dialogues on ET Now called KPMG Josh Conversations, driven to deliver the best. And today we are going to discuss the role of the new age CFO, how in a changing environment, the entire role of finance, the function of finance is undergoing a massive change. And I have four very special gentlemen experts on the channel to discuss this. Sai, let's start with you. Let's understand in the last couple of decades in the evolution of corporate India, the role of a CFO was more of working very closely with the promoter, more or less around capital allocation models. Yeah. But how do you think in this environment with disruption, all of that is undergoing a massive change?
So when you talk of disruption, what you see today is disruption happening at an unprecedented pace. And this is cross-sectoral, cross-functional. So whether it is the new age technologies that are kind of impacting businesses, be it the regulatory changes, be it the geopolitical kind of changes, the changing demographics, both impacting your consumers as well as the workforce that you're dealing with, the impact on kind of global business models, the convergence of business models and so on. So I think all of this is impacting business in a way like never before, to the point that businesses either disrupt themselves and thrive, or they essentially get disrupted and go out of business. So in a sense, it's an existential threat that many of these companies are kind of going through. So in this context, again, finance is at the heart of a lot of these changes that are happening, and in a sense, it's again important for finance function itself to disrupt the way they function and the role that each of the people within the finance function, led by the CFO, and how they kind of play a different role. So as compared to a traditional role, which is more focused on controllership, compliance, and all of that, and ultimately more about just preserving value, to looking at the future and looking at how they play a role as a cornerstone of strategy in the organization and kind of driving the organization through all of this disruption and kind of embracing opportunities for the future. I think that is where the big opportunity lies. And it's in this context that kind of KPMG recently conducted a survey on the Future Ready Finance 2019 survey, essentially trying to look at how organizations are embracing change, how finance organizations are embracing change, and both on the business model disruption as well as looking at the operational model disruption, be it on the elements of automation, the insights and analytics that they provide, the kind of organization model, skills and talent, and of course the ultimate the data governance and data kind of model that underpins all of this.
Talking specifically about the role of CFO or the role of finance in a company such as yours, how strategically important it is, and what are your observations over here in your current stint? How are you adding value to the organization?
The finance function as well as the CFO sit at the center of strategy in the organization. So you span the entire spectrum from strategy to operations to tactics and how execution is actually done. Particularly in an organization in the tech industry where innovation is happening very fast and business models are emerging and old business models are getting destroyed and new ones are coming through, the CFO makes sure that the business model is well understood across the organization. And once the business model is well understood, it needs to be converted into a mix of financial and non-financial metrics. So I think that's really the important role that finance plays. You make sure that the business model is grounded in financial metrics. Net present value of future cash flows is something that you always serve to optimize for. And then you make sure that some of the non-financial metrics, which are upstream and perhaps linked back to the customer, speak to the financial metrics. And making sure that you do this consistently across the organization and make sure that the bar keeps going higher and higher is what you would do to drive these business models.
Sanjay, let me come to you. You know, the sector which you represent, it has undergone a massive change in the last, say, 2 decades that has been around in India. How has been the role of the CFO in that evolution of the business model in India, as well as at your company, which has become a multinational company of sorts and has grown multifold in India?
So, as even Raghav was talking about, the evolution from a finance as well as a CFO function perspective has been, in fact, every day, because how things are changing, how technology is changing, and accordingly the need from a function perspective as well as from a role perspective. So CFO are not only now a number guy, right? Definitely domain may be the core, but still now the whole requirement is around strategic enabler. They are the business partner. They are the custodian of the good business as well as the financial practices. What they do to drive growth as well as to deliver the value to the stakeholders and all stakeholders. It's whether it's an employee, whether it's client, whether it's investor, around that. CEO, right now think and believe that the CFO is the right strategic partner for them in not only creating but implementing the strategic vision in the organization. So that's how I can define the evolution of the whole CFO, and irrespective of the industry.
So so what I understand from you is that the role of a CFO now more integral in long-term value creation for shareholders, and they work much more closely with the board. This part I'll continue with Ramesh. Ramesh, you were talking about how the focus is on value for large companies as well as small now, and CFO comes in as a critical entity who not only protects value but has to work closely to enhance value. Build a little more around that when we talk about value as pivotal for the company right now.
The CFO in a general sense does four things. The first is he looks at value protection. He looks at value enablement. He looks at value creation, as my friend was saying, and he looks at value communication. So from that perspective, when you speak about value protection, it's about making sure that that you adhere to compliance of law and the like to make sure that this business sustainability is kind of protected. In a very different way, the CFO is also responsible for value enhancement, for value enablement. And that would actually come through various processes. Processes, systems are an integral part of any operation. So you would have a lot of processes and so on. I think a very important part of the CFO's role is to make sure that there is simplification of all of this as well. Systems and processes are very important. Internal checks are very important. At the same time, it's for him to make sure that the processes are easily understood. It's as simple as possible, without making it draconian for business to comply. So I think the first two parts, when it comes to value protection and when it comes to value enablement, these are very important parts of a CFO's responsibility.
A regulatory point of view, the new age CFO, what kind of areas they need to cover so that overall efficiency of the company is much better in this environment?
When you speak about the regulations today, they are kind of evolving. It is evolving in terms of in keeping with the times today, because there are a lot of frauds, misstatements, omissions, lack of governance and all of that. And this is something which is going to continue. And to that extent, the CFO, if he's going to protect value, it's important for him to kind of make sure the existential questions relating to any company is kind of protected. And that's the first step. It's a very important step that he certainly has to be responsible for. So to that extent, all the actions that he takes to ensure compliance with legislation and law would be part of this responsibility. And I think given the newer set of requirements and the like, if it doesn't take course to, in fact, the newer technologies, digital technologies and the like, it'll be pretty difficult for him to kind of fulfill this responsibility of his. Equally, when it comes, in fact, to the balance sheet itself, there are several aspects of the balance sheet which need to be reinforced in terms of data integrity and the like. I was listening to Mrs. Kiran Mazumdar a few days ago when she spoke about the fact that the compliance requirements in India are ever increasing, and there's less and less time available for people to focus on, in fact, value on the business front itself. And that's not the way it should be. It's important that compliance is there. There are systems and processes, but at the same time, it's important for, in fact, the CFO to simplify processes so that the operations people can focus on what they're best good at, which is essentially delivering value. And that, I think, is an important part of, in fact, the CFO's function.
So one of the aspects that we are seeing, so apart from what Ramesh mentioned, is the change that's impacting every stakeholder in the corporate reporting ecosystem. So there are things that the CFO needs to do differently. The rules of the game are changing. The way the independent directors and the boards are starting to deal with things are changing. The way the auditors are looking at things are changing. And most importantly, the way regulators are going to start looking at this is starting to change. So I don't think we need more regulations or compliance, because the moment there's a corporate failure, the immediate response seems to be more regulations, etc. I think what needs to be done, and the need for the hour, is for the government to focus on better monitoring. So building, first of all, capacity to deal with all of this, and building better monitoring capabilities, and then kind of a balanced enforcement approach. And I think as a finance organization, they need to know that I think these laws and regulations are there, which if you look at it on paper are among the best in the world, but how do you kind of start complying with them in the true spirit? So compliance in spirit rather than I think just compliance in, to the letter of the law. I think that needs to be a focus there.
In fact, Raghav, I would like to understand from you the ability to simplify processes and adopting technology, or something else in terms of skill set. What are the things which will be essential for new age CFO to be very successful?
See, in terms of skill set, let's first call out the things that are not going to change. The skill set that deals with controllership is always going to be an integral part of the CFO. The skill set to be a strategic partner to the business and the CEO is not going to change. Now, what is going to change is that because of digitization, because of technology, the amount of data that is there in the organization is going to significantly change, which means that the finance person as well as the CFO has to spend a lot of his or her time dealing with data, handling data integrity, making sure that data tools, structures are of a high quality and that can be used by everyone else in the organization. Make sure that this data feeds into business models, especially new business models. And finance people will have to be very comfortable with ambiguity, because a lot of business models in the future will have a certain high degree of risk associated with it. So the finance mindset, while staying as a controller, has to occasionally let go and be willing to take risks, including the willingness to fail becomes very important. And that's something that as a skill set, the new CFO in the new era has to be willing. The person has to be a bit of a venture capitalist, which means that they have to be willing to take risks, allocate some part of capital for trying out new experiments, and be completely okay if some of these experiments fail. We have actually a very good quote which actually brings out the importance of the finance leader and the CFO who has to work a lot with AI, with machine learning, etc. We say that the finance leader of the future will spend perhaps only half their time dealing with people as opposed to 100% of the time, but the remaining half of the time they will actually spend dealing with machines, by which I mean data, analytics, algorithm, robotic process automation and things like that. So that's something in terms of which the skill set of the finance leaders of the future is going to be different from that in the past.
So one of the things that we've seen from a KPMG perspective is the successful finance organizations that are navigating this change are seeing how they kind of take finance away from being siloed organizations that they traditionally were to being a collaborative organization was the cornerstone of success or cornerstone of strategic growth. And to enable that, one is of course kind of upskilling all of them on just the core finance functions, because typically someone in controllership tends to be in controllership, somebody doing treasury tends to be in treasury, but it's about building that cross-functional finance capabilities itself, which is the core. And on top of that, building capabilities around data, around technology, about knowing how to leverage artificial intelligence, analytics, etc. So they don't need to necessarily become coders and start doing all of this, but they need to know the power of this to be able to leverage this much better. And coming to Ramesh's point in terms of collaboration, etc. So the behavioral is the third pillar that we're focusing on. So helping build a digital mindset, getting them to work with agile methodologies and so on. And lastly, collaboration and storytelling, because if ultimately finance has to be working with numerous other functions within the organization and kind of telling the story of the future, I think they need to have those kind of communication, collaboration and storytelling capabilities.
And as Ramesh was talking about, there was definitely also a challenge for us, which is adaptability to change. Now, they are so comfortable in those Excel environment. So we have to really go through the journey. So for a finance guy, sometimes comparing a budget versus actual becomes like analytics, right? And those are not analytics. So you need to have those design thinking training. You need to have those analysis and the analytical mindset training over there. And if they don't do, the message is pretty clear that those jobs will be replaced. So you have to reskill yourself. You have to spend time upskilling yourself. I believe the journey has just begun, because the way new things are coming up, the way evolution is happening, we have to continuously keep on, improving ourselves and adapting some of those stuff.
Sanjay, tell us about your own experience at the company, the way the transformation journey has been, and how has value been added at various stages?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting journey what we had. What we call is traditional, transitional, and transformational, right? So these are the three pillars. So we started some years ago into this entire journey, and the whole focus from my perspective to the team was that try to find out every manual activity which still exists. So though we have done a lot of those technology, ERP implementations and so on, but still finance guys love Excel, they love a lot of other faster mechanism. But because of that, there's a lot of manual dependencies. To keep on finding what are the activities are manual and try to automate them through the emerging technologies like robotics or maybe chatbot. Simple example from an accounts payable. After everything is done, still there is a lot of query and manual dependence was there. So chatbot definitely helps. The second important focus from my perspective was to identify data, and we are surrounded by the data so much. Now data does not cease to exist because we ignore it, right? There's so much data, and I keep on giving them example of NBA, the Rocket team, right? How they used technology and the analytics to have a winning edge, right? They put all the cameras around, they started analyzing the movement of the people or the players, and then started training them in a much better way, and they had a good score. So it's all about identification of the data, both known, unknown, structured, unstructured. It's all about collecting the data, massaging the data, storing the data, and then using all the visualization tools what you have to start giving the business insights and become a business partner.
Ramesh, would you like to add something there?
So there is no area in finance which is not touched by a lot of these digital interventions. You could start from, in fact, the revenue lines to, in fact, every item on the cost front and on every item on the balance sheet front. So there's a lot of digital interventions possible across each of those. So when you speak about value addition from a cost perspective, there's a lot of AI, ML techniques that can be adopted to kind of bring down the overall cost structure itself. Let's talk about predictive analytics for for maintenance itself. Algorithms could be in place for potentially looking at, in fact, repairs and maintenance bills being brought down over time. Certainly looking at, in fact, idle time of equipment being brought down, making it a lot more productive and the like. You could use a lot of analytics for actually looking at the way expense patterns turn out, spending a lot of time on, in fact, focusing on the essentials. You look at working capital management again. There are a lot of individual components in terms of the accounts receivable, in terms of inventories, in terms of the accounts payable. How various aspects of these can be controlled and monitored. Products which are items in the inventory which have been lying around. Is that related to, in fact, the total sales? A lot of this can actually be controlled by AI ML. In the same way, in terms of accounts receivable, it's possible to look at credit rating of customers and the like. So a lot of possibilities on the balance sheet front. I spoke a little while ago about, in fact, asset tracking and performance enhancement of assets itself. That's again a very something that can be done using a lot of AI ML techniques and the like. So there's every aspect of the business is something which can be touched by by newer age techniques, tools that are available in the market today.
If I can just sort of add, there's a leadership principle at Amazon which I think best summarizes what you're talking about. It is learn and be curious. You see, the pace of technology around us is changing so fast that everyone in the organization has to continuously keep learning. And when you learn, you also have to recognize and call out that what you've learned earlier needs to be unlearned. And this is especially more important for leaders at the top than perhaps people at the front line. And therefore, embedding learning and curiosity in an organization is extremely important for the new era.
Sai, would you like to sum up that this transformation is on at a lot of companies in India you work very closely with, but perhaps more widely need to be adopted?
Yeah. So again, just talking about this transformation, I think it's not just a digital transformation nor a transformation of one isolated function. For instance, earlier Ramesh was talking about, let's say, bringing in predictive analytics on maintenance to kind of have better predictive maintenance capabilities. But unless that is accompanied by an end-to-end operational transformation as well, touching several other functions, including looking at better inventory management, looking at better scheduling of your maintenance, looking at how that ties back to your treasury to kind of effectively deploy that additional kind of working capital, etc. You don't necessarily realize the kind of real outcomes that the organization could have ultimately got. So in a sense, I think as much as time and effort and money that you spend on a digital transformation of a function, I think an equal amount of effort needs to actually go in operationally transforming the rest of the organization to kind of embrace that change. I think that's an important part in this. And lastly, I just want to talk about the way a lot of organizations tend to embrace it. I think a lot of times companies choose a technology, say, okay, I want to deploy this technology, and then start building their plans around it. It's probably got to be the other way around. I think you've got to look at what is the business problem that you're trying to solve, what are the customer problems that you're trying to solve, and develop a roadmap in consultation with both the business and the customer viewpoints in mind. And then select the technology to actually enable and get to that endpoint that you want to get to. So in a sense, it's a process that you go through where you look at kind of transforming the entire finance organization. What does the finance organization do? How does it do it? What technologies does it use? What kind of outputs does it actually generate? And ultimately, how do you kind of drive the people in a very different manner to kind of become a strategic partner to the organization?
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful discussion of role of the finance department, role of the future ready CFO in order to add value overall to the organization going forward. Thanks very much for your time.